The year is 2012. The room is quiet. Fluorescent lights hum over a polished boardroom table. This is the State Agricultural Board Annual Review. Dr. Alistair Henderson stands at a podium. He is a man of data, of soil science and crop yields. He clicks to the next slide. A bar graph shoots toward the ceiling. Profitability per acre. One bar is twice as high as the others. It is labeled Vance Stewardship. Henderson clears his throat. He adjusts his glasses. He has presented this data for 20 years. He has never seen a number like this. He looks down at his notes. He looks back at the screen. The room is filled with men in suits, bankers, lobbyists, heads of major agricultural corporations. They lean forward. Henderson speaks. The Vance Stewardship Farm is an outlier. Its input costs are a third of the state average. Its yields are 30% higher in a drought year. He lets that sink in. During the worst drought in a generation, this one farm thrived. He says the numbers don't make sense. They defy the models. Someone in the front row speaks. Who is this Vance? Henderson flips a page. The founder is a woman named Eleanor Vance. The room goes silent again. A different kind of silence. Alistair Henderson did not know Eleanor Vance, but he knew the land she farmed. He had walked it 30 years prior. He had declared it near worthless, depleted, eroded, a lost cause. He remembers the auction. He remembers a young woman with a fierce, quiet look in her eye. He remembers the auctioneer looking right past her. He remembers thinking, she doesn't belong here. This is a story about the space between that thought and this graph. It's a story about being told you can't. Not with malice, not with anger, but with the calm, kind certainty of someone who thinks they are protecting you. This channel tells the stories of people who were written off, people who refuse to accept the verdict. If you believe those stories need to be told, subscribe, because what happened in that auction room 30 years ago changed everything. Let me tell you about 1982. Let me tell you about the rain that didn't fall, the bank that didn't wait. The Vance family had farmed the same 240 acres for a century. John Vance, Eleanor's father, was a good farmer. He followed the advice. He took the loans. He bought the new seed. He used the new chemicals. The dealer said they were a miracle. The banker said the debt was an investment. Everyone was certain. Then the sky turned to brass. The corn withered. The bank sent a letter. Then another. Then a man in a clean truck came and posted a notice on their gate. Eleanor was 19. She watched her father read it. She watched his shoulders slump. He didn't say a word. He just walked to the barn. He came back carrying a small leather-bound book, his father's ledger. Her grandfather's handwriting filled the pages. Notes on rainfall, crop rotations, cover crops, things the new experts called old-fashioned. John Vance placed the book in Eleanor's hands. They're taking the land, Ellie. He said it softly. A fact, like the sun rising. They're taking the buildings, the tractors, everything we borrowed against. He paused. But they can't take this. He tapped the book. And they can't take the dirt from under your fingernails. That's yours. The dirt is enough. Eleanor held the book. It felt heavier than its size. 2 weeks later, they packed their car. They moved into a small rental house in town. John Vance got a job at the grain co-op, loading trucks for men who had been his neighbors. Eleanor got a job at the diner, pouring coffee for those same men. She listened to them talk. About the Vance farm, about who might buy it at the foreclosure auction. It was good land, they said, just poorly managed. Needed a modern operator, someone who knew how to handle debt. Eleanor would wipe down the counter, her knuckles white. She saved every dollar, every single dime. For 3 years, she worked double shifts. She never bought a new dress. She never went to the movies. She and her father ate simple meals. At night, she read the leather book. She memorized the cycles. The wisdom of a man who never owed a bank a single dollar. Her grandfather believed in the soil, not the loan. The dirt is enough. It became her mantra. In the spring of 1985, the notice appeared in the paper. Public auction, 240 acres, the Vance farm. Eleanor circled the date. She went to the bank. Not the one that took their farm, a different one. She withdrew her savings. 3 years of tips from the diner. 3 years of her father's wages from the co-op. It was a staggering amount for them. A pittance for a farm. Not nearly enough. But her father had an idea. He had a brother in Ohio, a man who had left farming to build houses. John called him. He didn't ask for a gift. He asked for a loan, secured against his brother's belief in their family. The money arrived by wire 2 days before the auction. Combined with their savings, it was just enough. Maybe, if the bidding wasn't too fierce. The day of the auction was bright and cold. The county courthouse meeting room was packed. Farmers in seed caps, investors in crisp shirts, bankers in the back, observing. Eleanor and her father found seats near the wall. She held bitter paddle number 73. The number felt unlucky. The auctioneer took the stage. His name was Frank Miller, a pillar of the community. He served on the church board, coached Little League. Everyone trusted Frank. He had a booming, confident voice, a voice that settled deals and soothed nerves. He knew everyone in the room. He greeted men by name, asked about their families. His eyes scanned the crowd. They passed over Eleanor, a girl from the diner, John Vance's daughter. A shame what happened there. Frank Miller began the auction. He described the 240 acres. Prime land, he called it. Needs a firm hand, an operator with vision. And capital. He stressed the word capital. His gaze swept over the wealthy cattlemen in the front, the investors from the city. He started the bidding at $200,000. A hand went up. $250. Another hand. $300. The numbers climbed fast. $320. $340. $360. The bidding slowed. Frank Miller worked the room, his voice a hypnotic rhythm. $360,000. A fine price for a fine piece of ground. Do I hear $370? Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. This was their number. Their absolute limit was $400. She raised her paddle. Number 73. Frank's eyes were on a big rancher near the front. Come on, George. You're not letting it go for that. He didn't see her. Or he chose not to. George shook his head. The room was quiet. Going once, Frank called. Going twice. Eleanor raised her paddle higher. Her arm trembled. Her father put his hand on her shoulder. Just for a second. Frank's gaze swept the room again. It flickered past her. No recognition, no pause. It was as if her paddle was made of glass. Sold, he was about to say. No. Her father whispered it. Eleanor stood up. Her chair scraped against the floor. The sound was loud in the tense room. Every head turned. Frank Miller stopped. He looked at her. Annoyance flickered in his eyes. Then it was replaced by something else. Pity. A kind, gentle, condescending pity. He thought she was confused. He thought she was making a scene. Young lady, the bidding is concluded. Eleanor's voice did not shake. It was low and clear. It cut through the silence. You missed my bid. Frank Miller smiled a patient, fatherly smile. I'm sorry, miss. I didn't see a bid. I bid $370,000, Eleanor said. The rancher, George, grunted. He was out. Frank looked back at the last bidder, a man in a suit. The bid is $360. The gentleman here has it. The man in the suit looked uncomfortable. Frank was trying to protect her, to save her the embarrassment of bidding what she couldn't pay. He was being kind. It was the cruelest thing he could have done, because his kindness assumed her failure. His certainty was a cage. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something? Not by an enemy, but by a friend. By someone who smiled while they said it. Someone who believed they were helping you by limiting you. Tell me about it in the comments. Because that feeling, that quiet, hot indignation, is where this story truly begins. Eleanor did not sit down. She held Frank Miller's gaze. The bid is $360,000. She repeated slowly. I am bidding $370. Frank's smile faded. The room was dead silent. This was not in the script. He was the auctioneer. He controlled the room. He spoke again, his voice tight. Ma'am, this is a cash auction. You need to be able to back your bid. I can. The words hung in the air. A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. Who was this girl? Frank was cornered. He couldn't deny her without cause. He looked to the banker in the back. The banker gave a slight, imperceptible shake of his head. He knew the Vance family situation. He knew they had nothing. That tiny motion sealed Frank's certainty. She was bluffing. Or she was a fool. He turned to the man in the suit. Sir, do you bid $370? The man, flustered, shook his head no. Frank sighed, a show of great patience. Fine. The bid is $370,000. He pointedly did not look at Eleanor. He looked at the crowd. Do I hear 380? Silence. 390? A different investor, a man who had been quiet, raised a finger. 390,000. Frank nodded, relieved. Now we're back to business. $390,000. A real number from a real buyer. Do I hear 4? Eleanor raised her paddle again. Frank ignored it. He looked directly at the investor. Going once at 390. Her father stood up beside her. His face was pale. He said nothing. But his presence was a statement. We are here. Frank's eyes darted to them, flinched. Going twice. Eleanor's arm was aching. She felt the eyes of everyone in the room on her. The pity, the curiosity, the scorn. She had never felt so alone. He's not going to take it, her mind screamed. He will not let you win. He was about to say, sold. The gavel was in his hand. Eleanor dropped her paddle. It clattered on the floor. She took a breath, and she walked. She walked from the back of the room, down the center aisle, past the farmers who had known her since she was a child, past the bankers who had signed the foreclosure papers, past the investors who saw her land as a number on a spreadsheet. She walked until she stood directly in front of the auctioneer's podium. She placed her hands flat on the wood. She looked up at Frank Miller. Her voice was not loud, but it filled the entire room. $410,000. It was not a plea. It was a declaration. The room erupted. Frank Miller's face went white. She had broken every rule of auction decorum. She had challenged his authority in front of the entire county. He was furious. He was rattled. He looked at her. A 19-year-old girl in a worn coat. And for the first time, he saw the steel in her eyes. He saw her grandfather. He saw a century of Vances who had worked that dirt. He opened his mouth, closed it. He was a man of rules, and the rule was, a bid is a bid. He looked at the investor who had bid $390. The man just stared at Eleanor. He slowly shook his head. Frank Miller looked back at Eleanor. His voice was a strained whisper. $410,000. He looked around the room. A challenge. Anyone? Silence. A silence so deep you could hear the clock on the wall ticking. Going once? He looked at Eleanor. Going twice? He looked at her father, still standing in the back. Sold. He slammed the gavel down. The sound cracked like a rifle shot. To the young lady in the front. He didn't use her name. He couldn't. But he added one more thing. A final attempt to regain control. A final barrier. Proof of funds required at the county clerk's office by 5 p.m. today, or the sale is void. He had never made that demand before. Not in public. It was a final, petty jab. A final vote of no confidence. Eleanor just nodded. She turned and walked back up the aisle. Her father met her. He wrapped his arm around her. They walked out of the courthouse. They didn't speak. When they got to the car, her father finally spoke. He didn't say, "I'm proud of you." He didn't say, "We did it." He looked at her, his eyes full of a terrible, fierce love. He said, "Now the work begins." They had 2 hours. The wire transfer from her uncle was in her account. They went to the bank. They got a cashier's check, made out to the county, for $410,000. At 4:45 p.m., Eleanor Vance walked into the county clerk's office. Frank Miller was there, talking to the clerk. He stopped when he saw her. She didn't say a word. She just slid the check across the counter. The clerk, a woman named Mary, looked at the check, looked at Eleanor, looked at Frank, and she smiled. A small, knowing smile. She stamped the check, paid in full. She pushed a set of keys across the counter. "Congratulations, Ms. Vance. She's yours again." Eleanor took the keys to her own front door. Frank Miller watched her go. He felt something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't anger, not anymore. It was a profound and unsettling sense of being wrong. Eleanor and her father drove back to the farm. The notice of auction was still tacked to the gate. Her father tore it off, crumpled it in his fist. They unlocked the house. It was empty, hollow. Echoes of their old life everywhere. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sun. Her father walked to the window and looked out at the fields. The soil was pale, cracked. The previous renter had abused it, planted corn on corn, doused it with chemicals, stripped it bare. "It's hurt," he said. Eleanor came and stood beside him. She held up the leather-bound book. "We can fix it." That night they didn't celebrate. They sat at the old kitchen table. They opened the ledger. The first entry was from 1928. Her grandfather wrote, "Broke the new ground today. Soil is tired from the cotton. We'll plant clover for 2 years. The land must eat too." Eleanor traced the spidery handwriting with her finger. The land must eat too. The modern experts would laugh at that. Land was a medium, a thing to hold seed. To her grandfather, it was alive. For the next month, they worked. They didn't buy a big new tractor. They couldn't afford one. They bought an old, broken-down Alice Chalmers from a neighbor's fence row, an ally. An old farmer named Abe. He'd known her grandfather. Said he owed him a favor from a barn raising in '52. Abe helped Eleanor's father rebuild the engine. He taught Eleanor how to weld. The men at the co-op talked. Heard she bought the old place back. Heard she's trying to farm it with that piece of junk. She'll be broke by winter, they were certain. Eleanor didn't plant corn. She didn't plant soybeans. The ledger said the land was sick. It needed medicine. She went to the seed store. She didn't buy the expensive hybrid seed. She bought bags of buckwheat, of hairy vetch, of winter rye. The store owner looked at her order. "This is cover crop, ma'am. You can't sell this." "I'm not trying to sell it," Eleanor said. "I'm trying to feed the soil." She spent the spring planting a garden of weeds, the neighbors called it. Her fields weren't neat rows of green shoots. They were a chaotic mix of blossoms and stalks. It looked messy. It looked wrong. Frank Miller drove past one day. He slowed his truck. He shook his head. A damn shame. He felt a pang of guilt. He had let her buy it. He had let this girl, driven by sentiment, ruin herself. He had failed to protect her from her own foolishness. He was certain he would be selling that farm again in a year. That summer, Eleanor didn't harvest a crop. She let the buckwheat and vetch grow high. Then she and her father took the old Alice Chalmers out. They mowed it all down. They didn't plow it under. The ledger was specific. Never turn the soil unless you must. The life is in the top. They left the cuttings on the surface, a thick blanket of green manure. Worms returned to the soil. The hardpan began to soften. That fall, she planted winter wheat. She used a no-till drill she and Abe had modified, a strange contraption of welded steel and old disc parts. The neighbors laughed. But the wheat sprouted. It was thicker and greener than anyone expected. The next spring, the yield wasn't a record breaker, but it was solid, and her costs were almost nothing. No chemicals, no fertilizer, minimal fuel. She sold the wheat, paid her uncle back the first installment on the loan. Cash. She had a profit of $18,000. Cash. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was proof. The dirt was enough. Let me tell you about the next 25 years. Let me tell you about quiet work, about proving people wrong without saying a word. The story of Eleanor Vance is not a story of one dramatic moment. It is a story of 10,000 small, consistent ones. By 1988, her soil was alive, dark and rich. Her yields were matching the county average. Her profits were double. That spring, the 80-acre parcel bordering her land came up for sale. The farmer was retiring. He'd used all the modern methods. His soil was tired. He offered it to Eleanor first. He'd seen her fields. He'd seen her results. She paid him his price. $72,000. Cash. She put his land on the same recovery program. 2 years of cover crops. The neighbors stopped laughing. Now they were watching. By 1995, she owned 500 acres, all contiguous, all paid for, cash. She bought another 160 acres at auction that year. Frank Miller was the auctioneer. When Eleanor raised her paddle, he stopped the auction. He looked directly at her. His voice was clear. "I have a bid from Ms. Vance." He used her name. It had taken him 10 years. She bought the land. Cash. Frank Miller saw her success. He drove past her farm on his way to church. In the dry years, her crops were green. His clients were yellow. In the wet years, her soil soaked up the rain. His clients washed into the ditch. He heard the numbers at the co-op. Vance is getting 60 bushels of wheat an acre. The county average was 45. Vance's soybeans are testing at higher protein. She was getting a premium. He didn't understand it. She was farming backwards. She was breaking all the rules the experts preached. The experts he trusted. The certainty he had lived by was eroding. Like the topsoil on his clients' farms. Eleanor never spoke of the auction. She never gloated. When she saw Frank in town, she would nod, a simple, polite nod. It was more devastating than any accusation. Her success was the only comment necessary. By 2005, Vance Stewardship was a name people knew. Agricultural students from the state university came to tour her farm. They took soil samples. They studied her crop rotations. They wrote papers about the Vance method. It was her grandfather's method, from a dusty leather book. She hired her first employee, then two more. Her father, now in his 70s, still worked beside her. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. He was no longer the man with slumped shoulders. He was the patriarch of the most successful farm in the county. Eleanor began buying land aggressively, parcels that were considered worn out, land other farmers couldn't make a profit on. She saw them not as liabilities, but as opportunities. In 2008, she bought 1,200 acres in a single purchase from a corporate farm that went bankrupt. They had leveraged themselves to the hilt. They were certain commodity prices would stay high. They were wrong. Eleanor paid for the land with money she had in the bank, cash. She was now one of the largest landowners in the region, and she had zero debt. Zero. She answered to no one, not a banker, not a shareholder. Only the soil. The dirt was enough. The year is 2011. The rain stops. For a whole year, the sky is a merciless blue. The drought is worse than 1982. It is a biblical drought. The county withers. Corn tassels in June, a sign of extreme stress. Soybean pods are empty. Farmers who borrowed heavily against high yields are wiped out. Bank notices appear on gates again. A ghost from Eleanor's past. Eleanor's farm is an island of green in a sea of brown. Her soil, rich with organic matter after decades of care, holds moisture like a sponge. Her crops are shorter than usual. Her yields are down. But she has a crop. Most of her neighbors have nothing but debt. One day in the fall of 2012, another auction notice appears in the paper. A foreclosure. 320 acres. The farm belonged to Thomas Miller, Frank Miller's son. The auction is held in the same courthouse room. It is not packed this time. The mood is not optimistic. It is a funeral. Frank Miller is not the auctioneer. He is sitting in the front row, an old man watching his family's legacy be dismantled. His son stands beside him, staring at the floor. The auctioneer, a young man Frank had trained, speaks in a somber voice. The bids are low. The bank representative looks grim. The bidding stalls at a price that is less than the debt on the land. Eleanor Vance is standing in the back. She came to watch, to witness, not out of spite, out of respect for the cycle, the turning of the wheel. Frank Miller turns his head. He sees her. His eyes, once full of certainty and pity, are now hollow. He looks at her, and in his gaze is a confession, a silent admission of a lifetime of being wrong. He had advised his son, told him to trust the experts, to leverage the land, to be modern. He had been certain it was the right path. The bidding is about to close. The young auctioneer asks for a final bid. Silence. Eleanor raises her paddle. Number 73. The auctioneer's eyes light up. He knows who she is. Everyone knows who she is. Eleanor Vance. She makes one bid, a fair price, enough to make the bank whole, enough to give the Miller family a sliver of dignity. No one bids against her. They wouldn't dare. Sold. To Eleanor Vance. After the auction, the room clears out quickly. Only Eleanor, her father, and the Millers remain. Frank Miller walks over to her. He is an old man. The booming voice is gone. He stands before her, a supplicant. He does not apologize for the auction 30 years ago. That slight seems so small now, so insignificant. He says, "My boy Tom. He did everything they told him to do. All the right seed, the best chemicals, the biggest equipment." He gestures vaguely. He was trying to explain, to understand it himself. Eleanor listens. She does not say, "I told you so." She does not say anything about her own path. She just waits. Frank finally looks at her. Why did you buy it? Eleanor thinks of the girl with the worn coat, the girl who was invisible. She thinks of the hot shame, the cold determination. She could have said 1,000 things. Instead, she says something her grandfather wrote in his ledger in 1934 during the Dust Bowl. Because the land shouldn't be punished for a man's mistakes. Then she does something else, something that isn't in the ledger. She looks at Tom Miller, the defeated young man who lost his heritage. You're a good farmer, Tom. You just had bad advice. She pauses. I'll lease you the land back. Tom's head snaps up. Frank stares at her. For $1 a year. Her voice is quiet, factual. You can farm it for me. There's a condition. You have to farm it my way. She holds out her hand. Not to Frank, to his son. Tom Miller looks at her hand. He looks at his father. His father, the man of certainty, just nods. Slowly. Tom shakes her hand. That day, the Vance method became something more than a technique. It became a lifeline. It became a legacy. Eleanor Vance did not stop there. The story doesn't end with a quiet victory. It begins there. She created the Vance Stewardship Program. It wasn't a charity. It was an investment in people, in the dirt. She bought other farms that were on the brink of foreclosure. She didn't evict the families. She retrained them. She taught them the lessons from her grandfather's book, how to heal the soil, how to farm without debt, how to be free. She created a cooperative for the farmers in her program. They shared equipment. They shared knowledge. They sold their crops together under the Vance Stewardship brand. A brand that meant quality. A brand that meant integrity. A brand that got the highest prices. The profits went back to the farmers. By 2015, the program had saved 12 family farms, over 10,000 acres. She established a scholarship, the Eleanor Vance Grant for Young Farmers. It didn't go to the students with the best grades. It went to the ones with the most dirt under their fingernails. It gave them startup capital, debt-free. The only condition was they had to follow the principles of stewardship. And they had to mentor another young farmer in their first 5 years. The legacy wasn't just in the soil, it was in the people. It was a ripple effect of quiet belief. Alistair Henderson, the professor from the Agricultural Board, eventually asked to meet her. He came to the farm. He walked the fields with her. He saw the life in the soil. He saw the efficiency. He saw the profit. He finally understood the graph on his slide. He asked her, "How did you know? How did you know this would work when all of us, the experts, were telling you to do the opposite?" Eleanor stooped down. She picked up a handful of her soil. It was dark and crumbly. It smelled sweet. She held it out to him. "I didn't know," she said, "but the land did. I just learned how to listen." Today, Vance Stewardship manages over 30,000 acres, all debt-free. It is a model of regenerative agriculture studied around the world. Eleanor is in her 60s now. She still drives the old Alice Chalmers sometimes, the one she and Abe welded together. It sits in the main barn, a reminder. Her father passed away a few years ago, peacefully, on the land he had lost and gotten back. His leather-bound book, the little ledger, sits on the desk in the main office. It's not in a glass case. It's there to be used. Her granddaughter, a young woman with a degree in soil science and Eleanor's fierce eyes, sometimes takes it down. She runs her hand over the faded ink. She reads the words her great-great-grandfather wrote. "The land must eat too. The dirt is enough." Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is being told they can't. Someone is being dismissed, ignored, written off by a person who is certain they know better, a person who might even be kind about it. Eleanor's story is a reminder that certainty is the enemy of possibility, that the world is full of experts who are experts in the world as it is, not as it could be. Her story is proof that the most powerful force on earth is not capital, not technology. It is quiet, relentless, daily work. It is the refusal to accept someone else's verdict on your life. If this story means something to you, subscribe to this channel. We tell the stories of the underestimated, the overlooked, the ones who prove the world wrong. In the comments, tell me about a time you chose to listen to that quiet voice inside you instead of the loud voices outside. And share this video. Share it with anyone who has ever been told they can't. Share it with anyone who needs to be reminded that sometimes the only thing you need is the dirt under your fingernails and the belief that it is enough.